If the San Francisco Giants were limited to signing just one free agent for the remainder of the offseason, who would you choose and why? Welcome into another edition of the Kerry Crowley Show, analyzing all things Giants baseball. And today, we're discussing the remaining free agents left available to the San Francisco Giants and how they fit this ball club if the Giants pursue them. So let's get things out of the way at the start here. This is just a hypothetical exercise. I'm of the belief that the Giants need to sign at least two other players and or pull off a blockbuster deal to fortify their rotation, to build up their lineup, because right now, in my estimation, this roster is not good enough to secure a postseason berth. I think the Giants, if everything goes according to plan, could be on the fringes of postseason contention. Remember, really, you only have to enter the final 2 weeks of the regular season playing about 500 baseball with the expanded postseason field to give yourself an opportunity to make the playoffs. We saw the Giants this season. They were in a playoff position with about 2, 3 weeks to go left in the regular season, and then they completely crumbled. That series against the Diamondbacks stands out in the minds of everyone, both inside the walls of 24 Willie Mays Plaza and inside the minds of every fan who watched the 2023 season with high hopes that this team could eventually make the playoffs. I think they were in, the third best record in the National League in June, July, and then the offense completely slipped off the face of the earth. The pitching staff fell apart at the end of the season. And when they faced the Diamondbacks in September at Chase Field, it was a series that stood out for a number of reasons, but mostly because the Diamondbacks were so much more athletic. They had their foot on the gas pedal. The Giants clearly did not stack up from a talent standpoint, from a potential standpoint. And that sent a message to Giants ownership, to the Giants president of baseball operations, Farhan Zaidi, that things need to change. And in my estimation, things have not changed fast enough this offseason. Yes, the Giants have signed outfielder Jung Hoo Lee, who I think will solidify center field and bat atop the order as the leadoff hitter consistently throughout the regular season. They have also added Robbie Ray via the trade with the Seattle Mariners. Of course, he won't be back until the second half of the season, and no one knows what he'll be able to give the rotation coming off of Tommy John surgery. They've also made the bold, aggressive move to try out Jordan Hicks as a starter in their rotation, at least during spring training, signing him to a 4-year, $44 million contract. And look, I covered this in a previous episode. I'm skeptical that this works, but I also really like the idea of bringing Jordan Hicks onto this staff because I think at worst, as long as he's healthy, you're getting someone who can pitch at the back end of your bullpen. And look, you're already paying Taylor Rogers $11 million annually on that 3-year contract to be a setup man for you. $11 million seems to be about the going rate for quality relievers who aren't closer caliber relievers. I think that if that is what Jordan Hicks is for the San Francisco Giants, a seventh, eighth inning guy who slots in alongside Tyler Rogers, Ryan Walker, potentially allowing them to pitch in the sixth and seventh, and and Hicks can take the eighth while Camilo Doval takes the ninth. That's a pretty good scenario for the Giants. Of course, they're counting on him giving length at the outset of the season in the rotation, and we'll see how that plan goes. But I bring up all of these transactions because it's still abundantly clear the Giants need several more difference makers to add to their roster this offseason. And I'm of the belief that they'll probably strike at least once, if not two more times, in the free agent market. So I kind of wanted to go through this hypothetical exercise of if they were limited to just one more free agent, who should this team sign? Because I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments section. I'd love to debate this in the coming weeks as the free agent market kind of clears itself up. We've seen a number of the top players sign this offseason, but there are still several solid players available. So let's start at the very top of my board right now. And I think that Blake Snell, the reigning Cy Young Award winner, who of course pitched for Bob Melvin in San Diego last year with the Padres, is the best free agent pitcher available for the Giants. And I say this knowing that his contract would probably cost upward of 180, potentially $200 million if he comes to San Francisco. You're talking about someone who's 30, 31 years old, potentially signing a 6, 7 year deal. And it's often difficult for those deals to work out in favor of teams. Players love them, of course, and why wouldn't they? Because you're getting financial security in your early 30s and knowing that you're not going to be changing teams until potentially your late 30s, the end of a deal, if you sign off on a trade, something like that. So I think the important thing to get out of the way is with Blake Snell, he does not necessarily fit the Giants pitching ethos, which is to control the strike zone, to limit walks, to for their starters to have low pitch counts and get ground balls. Snell, of course, led the majors in walks last season with 99. He's never thrown, I think, more than maybe 181 innings in his major league career. And if that stat is wrong, I just know that he's not pitched consistently deep into ball games the way that someone like a Logan Webb already has in his young major league career. But I'm of the belief that Snell would be a great signing for the Giants simply because he misses bats. He gets strikeouts, he racks up strikeouts at an elite rate, and the Giants need to miss bats this season because you're talking about a rotation that has a ton of question marks. I love the potential of Keaton Winn, of Carson Whisenhunt, of Kyle Harrison, Tristan Beck, Mason Black, a lot of different pitchers who will factor into the mix this year. But I think that there is still no clear number two for the San Francisco Giants. Of course, signing Jordan Hicks is hope for this team. Robbie Ray could potentially come back and be that number two. But who's your number two in April, in May, until Alex Cobb comes back? And so I like the idea of signing Blake Snell. I think that he is clearly the best free agent starting pitcher available, and he is someone who I think you could make a compelling case that if they were just to sign one more guy, if they were to splurge and splurge at the top end of the market, you could make the case that Blake Snell should be that guy. Now, the other argument that I would hear if you're listing out a starting pitcher that the Giants should go out and sign, if they were limited to, again, just one move, and this is totally hypothetical, Jordan Montgomery, who I think a lot of people have indicated that he could go back to the Texas Rangers. I'm not as sold on Montgomery being a long term, big upside addition to the rotation. I think that from what I've read, he's probably going to sign for anywhere between 140, $180 million. And I don't know that I have the confidence in investing in Montgomery the way that I do in a Blake Snell. That's why pretty much every free agent, analyst or any MLB analyst has listed Snell ahead of Montgomery. Now, if you're skeptical about Snell's fit for the Giants pitching staff, if you think that Montgomery is going to age better, let me know in the comments section because I am curious to see if there are people out there who think that Jordan Montgomery would just be a better fit overall for the San Francisco Giants. So, with that in mind, let's talk hitters because I think that it's very clear when you look at this Giants lineup that it's still devoid of power, that they're still going to struggle to score runs. And even if some of these impressive prospects like Marco Luciano, Casey Schmidt, Tyler Fitzgerald, if they all pan out in the infield, and who knows, Fitzgerald could play some outfield as well. Luis Matos, Wade Meckler, if some of these guys produce in ways that maybe the Giants aren't expecting this season and, come into 2024 able to step up right away, that would be a huge development for this team. And it would lengthen the lineup. It would give them an opportunity to certainly compete for a wild card berth if they get contributions that are above and beyond what you can realistically expect from young major league players with relatively limited experience, the upper levels of the minors and the major league level. So let's talk about maybe the player that the Giants have been linked to most frequently this offseason. That's third baseman Matt Chapman. And I know that there's a big split among Giants fans as to whether the team should be pursuing Chapman. Quite frankly, I am surprised that Chapman has not signed a deal yet. I thought at the outset of the offseason, the Giants would just strike quick and that would be the guy that they'd work to lock up, even before maybe an Ohtani or a Yamamoto pursuit. I thought that Matt Chapman to the Giants made a ton of sense from what they want, which is to be more athletic, to play better defense. He's a platinum caliber glove at third base. And you may not be in love with the bat. I totally understand that. But he does have the familiarity with Bob Melvin. Everyone who knows Matt Chapman has talked about him as a tremendous culture fit for any clubhouse. He's a leader. He is, someone who provides stability at third base. And I think there's a lot of intangibles to talk about with Matt Chapman that you maybe wouldn't be discussing with a free agent pitcher who only pitches every fifth day. I think position players are able to have a greater impact on a club in terms of the intangibles, in terms of setting the tone inside the clubhouse, work ethic, the way you pick yourself up after a tough loss, after a tough at bat in a key situation. I think that Matt Chapman has exemplified some great characteristics throughout his major league career. And the glove, to me, isn't going away anytime soon. That throwing arm is special. It's just a matter of if you can hang with the relatively low on base percentage and batting average and potentially diminish slugging potential later on in his major league career. So this is probably a third baseman who wants a 5 or 6 year contract. I think that the Giants, if they can get him at 4 years and maybe pay him an inflated average annual value over those 4 years, maybe pay him $25 million instead of $20 million, that's a better deal for this team. But again, I don't think you want to get into a 5, 6, 7 year situation where you're married to Matt Chapman for that long, just because I have question marks about what he would look like at 34, 35, 36 years old. The same way I think that the Giants probably did when they acquired Evan Longoria. They did a whole episode comparing these two players back in that 2017 offseason after the Giants lost 98 games. Now, Chapman is not the only position player at the top end of the market still available. The Giants have at times been linked to Cody Bellinger this offseason. Of course, there's familiarity with Bellinger because he was in the Dodgers organization when Farhan Zaidi was down, working in the Dodgers organization. I was very big on Bellinger as a prospect, of course, former National League MVP winner. Great bounce back season last year with the Chicago Cubs. And of course, Wrigley Field, a very solid hitter environment, a nice place to have a platform season. But Bellinger is a Scott Boras client, and that means he's going to be looking for a major deal at the top end of the market. We're talking something like maybe 8 to 10 years because he's a relatively young free agent. I think he's 28 years old. He plays impressive defense basically wherever you put him. I think center field, first base, the guy can play all three outfield spots, and I think he's just an excellent athlete. Now, the question is, how is that bat going to age? Because we've seen Bellinger at his best. He's a truly game-changing player. But throughout his young major league career, and I say young because he's still one of the younger free agent position players available, we've also seen Bellinger at his absolute worst. And I think that, at times with the Dodgers, he became unplayable. This is someone who was non-tendered in Los Angeles before going to the Chicago Cubs last year. And of course, had a big bounce back season. There's reason to believe that he can continue his success with the bat moving forward in his major league career and that these tweaks that he found are going to work for him. But he does have durability questions about the shoulder injury that have followed him through his major league career. He does have the question about what he really looks like at the bottom of his performance bell curve because it's ugly and it's something that should worry teams signing him to a long-term deal. And I just don't know that the fit is quite there for the San Francisco Giants anymore because they did sign Jung-Hoo Lee to the 6-year, $113 million contract. Now, with that being said, if you want to put the absolute best defensive outfield forward, I think that you could play Austin Slater and Mike Yastrzemski in right field. You could play Cody Bellinger in center. You play Jung-Hoo Lee in left field. And then you've got, Luis Matos, Wade Meckler off the bench, Michael Conforto's strictly a DH from the left side. And then all of a sudden you're talking about a really strong defensive outfield that can cover a lot of ground, which is, of course, imperative to do in National League ballparks. But if you're spending on defense, I kind of feel like with a team with as many ground ball pitchers as the San Francisco Giants, remember, Logan Webb, a tremendous ground ball pitcher, Jordan Hicks, who they've just added, a very high ground ball rate with that 101 mile an hour sinker. You want good defenders on the infield, which is why I think you could make the case that Matt Chapman could be that guy. Now, I know that there are other names that if you're restricted to just one free agent on the market this offseason that could come up. So please drop those in the comments section. Would love to see them. And I'll throw out one right now. I know that there's a lot of people who are uncomfortable with the idea of the Giants giving so much money to a Blake Snell or a Jordan Montgomery when next year's free agent class is really strong on starting pitching. I think Max Fried is one of the names who comes to mind. There's a number of others who have slipped my mind right now who make next year's free agent starting pitching class really appealing. And so if you're going to bet big, there are just surer bets next offseason. Now, with that being said, the Giants can't kick the can down the road anymore. They've got to get better. They've got to get better immediately. And this is a Giants organization that has often said in the past, well, we struck out in free agency this year. Next year, we have to hit on someone. And inevitably, they haven't hit on someone. So I think it's important for the Giants to consider that if they're thinking about next year's free agent class. But if you're not sold on a Blake Snell, if you're not sold on a Jordan Montgomery, if you don't think that playing Matt Chapman would be better than just turning third base over to Casey Schmidt, if you think that Cody Bellinger is not someone you're worth taking the risk on, then maybe the free agent for you is Rhys Hoskins, because the Giants could theoretically sign Rhys Hoskins, who's coming off the ACL injury that forced him to miss almost all of last season with the Philadelphia Phillies, to a 1-year platform contract. So maybe 1 year, $24 million, and he solidifies first base, or he's a designated hitter from the right side of the plate. He's someone with 30 home run potential. I think his 162 game rate, if I have this correctly, is 36 home runs per 162 games. And the Giants would obviously love to have that kind of power in the middle of their lineup. And so I think that Rhys Hoskins is someone who, if you're of the belief the Giants should stop spending money right now, it's kind of a hopeless cause. Just focus on, seeing what these kids can do in the rotation, in the lineup, and fortifying around them and building for 2025 and beyond. Maybe Rhys Hoskins is your guy. What I will say is if that happens, I think that maybe Wilmer Flores becomes a trade candidate because he's playing on an expiring deal that's a very, very owner team-friendly contract. Wilmer Flores, coming off a great season last year, has had really solid seasons with the San Francisco Giants. it would be tough to improve upon his production. You'd be paying Hoskins a whole lot more, and they're essentially duplicate each other with the positions they play. Wilmer is, someone who think the guy is a tremendous fit for the clubhouse, but he shouldn't be bringing his glove to the ballpark on a daily basis. His bat you want in the lineup. It was very solid. It was one of the only reasons the Giants were able to stay afloat during the second half of last season until they fell apart. But I think that Hoskins maybe a little more certainty there, and a Northern California native, someone who I think that fans could rally around. And of course, that's not to say that fans haven't rallied around Wilmer Flores. It would just be difficult, I think, to have those two players on your team when they're essentially duplicating each other in terms of the defensive positions they play. And maybe you have one at first base, one as your DH, but then what do you do with Lamont Wade Jr., who's, a platoon player who's scheduled to face right-handed pitching and probably isn't going back to the outfield with this glove? Maybe you trade Lamont Wade Jr. Maybe that's the solution. You keep both Flores and Rhys Hoskins. But again, these are all determinations that I think the Giants are considering right now. I think that if you're a fan and you're thinking about the way that this Giants team can get better, you've probably thought about the names. Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, Cody Bellinger, Rhys Hoskins, Matt Chapman, and maybe you're looking at the bullpen. Maybe it's a Josh Hader who's the best free agent closer available, and you think the Giants should just shorten the game. I don't think that there's a whole lot of those fans out there. I think there's a lot of fans who would like to see traditional starting pitchers in San Francisco, and for the Giants to stop doing these bullpen games. Look, I'm of the belief that they've got to stop at some point. But also, when you're mixing younger pitchers in, it's an easier way to kind of elevate them to the major league level while keeping their innings count in check. And so, with all that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Theoretically speaking, if the Giants had just one free agent left to add this offseason, who would you choose and why? I think that my ultimate choice would probably be Blake Snell, just because I think that pairing him with Logan Webb atop the Giants rotation would give them a really formidable 1-2 punch. I like the idea of someone who has had success against the Dodgers, and I like the idea of adding left-handers to your rotation because I think that Kyle Harrison offers the Giants a really high ceiling in the future. I think that Carson Wisenhunt could be a starter in the Giants rotation by the end of the 2024 season. And if you have lefties in your rotation, I think that that could thwart the Dodgers with Ohtani, with Freddie Freeman. I think that that is a solid way to counter a team. And then you get into the 6th, 7th, 8th innings. You go Ryan Walker, Jordan Hicks, Tyler Rogers, and Camilo Doval from the right side. Think about the 4 angles you're going to face from that right side of the bullpen. Just completely different pitchers right there. So you're throwing off eyesight. You're making things difficult on opposing hitters late in ball games. I like the idea of loading the rotation with lefties, of building through the rotation, through your roster with starting pitchers. I think that that could be the best strategy for the Giants moving forward. But I know that there will be people who disagree. I'm eager to read those comments, and I'm eager to see what you have to say about if the Giants had just one more move to make. And again, I think that they have several they should be making this offseason. Who would you choose and why? That's it for this edition of the Kerry Crowley Show. Back later this week with my good friend, Roger Munter. Thanks so much for watching.